I'm excited to be back with everyone today. So as we're getting going here, for whoever was here last week, we talked about gratitude. So if you could type in the chat one thing you are grateful for today, it can be really small. Like today, I went outside in the sunshine. It was beautiful. So if you can type that in the chat and let us know what you're grateful for. And today we're going to be talking about how to build positive habits, specifically in uncertain times, which is, generally what we're going through now a little bit. But really, these can be applicable to any area of your life. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going here. All right. And one thing I do want to note, I mentioned this last week as well, but if you want to make my face a little bit bigger, because likely right now it's really small, what you can do is head to next to where it says Michelle is sharing her screen. You can click the menu there and enter side-by-side mode where you can drag out the camera screen so it's a little bit bigger as well. All right. So for those that weren't here last week, my name is Michelle Wax. I'm really excited to be here today. I am the founder of the American Happiness Project, which started out as a documentary that was filmed throughout all 50 states in America. So really what our goal was for that documentary was to capture how everyday people are creating more happiness, more fulfillment, more joy, more positive habits in their everyday life, regardless of what's happening around them. Because obviously stressful things are going to come up. Things are not going to go according to plan all the time. But how do you take what's within your control and start creating more positive habits, specifically for today, more happiness, more joy, just greater energy in general. So previous to founding American Happiness, I was an entrepreneur in the food industry here in Boston, Massachusetts, and really found myself where I'd reached this point where I thought I should have been really happy in kind of the outside world, the objective things I had accumulated. I should have been really happy, but I didn't feel myself with that internal happiness. And so I started digging into the science of how the brain is hardwired, how this really affects our happiness levels. And throughout the past couple of years, I've worked with a lot of great companies and organizations and have gotten a lot of great press all across the country. And so what our focus is on today is really those tangible things that you guys can start doing today that are going to make an impact long term. And so what we do is we combine the science of how the brain is wired. We're going to get into why it can be difficult to really wire positive habits if we're not using the subconscious mind, and as well as all the practical psychology research we've done throughout the United States. So really what our focus is at American Happiness is to capture the perspectives and stories and approaches of Americans all across the country from all walks of life, all different backgrounds, income levels, circumstances, and share the things that they are doing day to day in order to build more positive habits and just create more joy in the everyday. So to get into habits today, I feel like the word should is a very big word in the habit world, or just really in any part of life, right? We all know what we should be doing. And often we hear common phrases such as, I know I should do that, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, right? And we say this so much, but why can it be so hard to stick to these positive things we want to implement in our lives, right? We all objectively know what we should be doing, right? We know it's good to eat healthy, it's good to exercise. These things are common sense, but it can be difficult to actually implement and stick to it in our daily lives without some real strategies, some tangible things that are going to work well with how the brain is wired and how this ties into really using your brain to your advantage. And that's what we're all about here, is taking that wiring, which we got into a little bit last week. I'm going to go over it in a moment as well. But really taking that wiring and using it to your advantage to build more positive habits in whatever area you want. So today we're going to get into the simple neuroscience behind habit formation, a step-by-step plan to start building positive habits, and most importantly, the top 3 habits Americans are using across the country for happiness, for greater productivity as well. And last week we did do a couple of breakout rooms where you guys can connect with one another. I did want to note that if you don't want to turn on your camera, that's totally fine. We just ask that you join the breakout room and participate with the audio if you're able to. I know I've been on some Zoom Zoom workshops where I don't want to turn on my camera, so I completely understand that. But if you're able to join via audio, that would be amazing, and that'll come in a little later in the workshop. So to get into the science a little bit, last week we chatted about neuroplasticity, and for those that weren't here, what it is, it's a big word, but essentially it's that the brain is always changing, it's always evolving, it's always growing, and it can always be improving as well. And I gave the illustration last week of picturing the last time you were in a forest or going for a walk in the woods, right? Generally, there's one carved out pathway when you arrive at the parking lot or the entrance, and it's easiest to go down that pathway. But as you walk in the forest or on these trails, you'll find there are other trails that are carved out that you can easily go down. Others are not as easily walkable. You can't go down them as easy. And so picture this complex forest, right? Picture you're walking along these trails in your daily life, and then go big with it, right? Picture millions and millions of trails all throughout, really carving out all different ways that you can walk down, you can approach. Some are not clearly defined, others are, right? And this is the way that your brain is really wired. And these trails are being formed and reinforced and overgrown all day, every day. And the way that these trails are formed throughout the wiring of your brain, these pathways, are really through your thought process, right? So every single time you have a thought, you're carving out a pathway in your mind that is leading to some form of a habit, no matter what it might be. All right. It could be helping you, it could be not helping you as much. But these neural pathways are carved out all day, every day, with every single thought you have. We have up to 60,000 thoughts per day. So there's a lot of opportunity to start using these trails to your advantage. Now, these neural pathways within the subconscious mind are really your habits of thinking, feeling, and acting. All right. And they really get developed over time to the point where a lot of things we start doing initially don't feel that comfortable or feel different, or we just don't really like doing it at first. It feels unnatural. And going back to last week, we chatted about, how the brain is always going to go down the easiest path. It's always going to look to conserve energy and conserve willpower. And so you're always going to go down the pathways in your mind, this forest of your mind that are carved out the most, that are the deepest groove. So ideally, what we want to start doing is carving out the pathways or those grooves that are going to help us, right? That go towards those positive habits. And a great example of this is, of course, learning how to drive, right? When you first learned how to drive, it was likely pretty strange, pretty uncomfortable, pretty weird, right? I know for me personally, I was in the parking lot with my mom, and this is not us, it's just a random photo. And, I almost hit 3 different cars. I'm slamming on the brake, I'm turning on the radio, she's yelling at me, right? It's this really chaotic, kind of uncomfortable situation. But of course, over time, driving becomes second nature, and we can do it so easily. We can think about other things as we're doing it. And so this is really the level of positive habits that we want to get to, is this level of driving. It's just ingrained into who we are. And talking about habits in general, normally when people think of habits, they think of some form of physical action, right? You think of a positive habit is you eat healthy or you don't. You work out or exercise or you don't. You wake up early or you don't, right? These habits are often talked about in a more physical action way. But habits can also be a way of thinking, right? What's your first thought when you wake up in the morning? Where are you going in your mind, right? First thing in the morning, as you progress throughout your day, when a stressful situation comes up, what's your habit of thinking? What's that wiring going to automatically? And it can also be your habit of feeling, right? How are you feeling in the morning, right? Are you thinking about all the things that you have to do that day and starting to feel stressed out and worried about it? Or do you feel calm and assured that you can get everything done and you're excited for the day ahead? So as we go throughout the workshop today, think about what your current habits are of thinking, of feeling, of acting, of course, right? Those are more traditional habits, but also ways of thinking and feeling, because that influences a lot of our day-to-day as well. So habits are what we believe to be true, and why you do what you do, right? It's why we believe some things are possible and others aren't. It's why we take action in some ways and not others. It's why we feel stuck in certain areas of our life, but really good in other areas as well, right? These habits of thinking, feeling, and acting are really ingrained into us. But thanks to neuroplasticity, these can always change and improve, right? You can always be forming new habits. Forming new habits is actually a fairly simple process. Doesn't mean it's easy though. With anything in life, consistency is more valuable than kind of the acceleration of it, right? It's more important to be implementing things in small doses over time than to do some dramatic effort and then fall off a cliff with it, right? So over time, we just want to remain consistent with the tactics and strategies that we're going to get into today. So every single time that you stick to this positive habit plan that we're going to get into, you're reinforcing a positive trail in your mind. And remember that your brain is always going to go down the easiest path. So the more you carve out these systems, these habits, the easier it is for not only your thought process and the way you feel to go in that direction, but also, of course, your way of acting as well, whatever habit you want to start incorporating. And I encourage you guys as we go throughout today as well, most often in habits, we think of, okay, what do you want to change, right? Maybe you want to start waking up earlier, or maybe you want to start eating healthier. But for every habit that is action oriented, try to think of one that you can do in a thinking or feeling way as well. And an example of this is I was chatting with someone the other day who they wanted to start being friendlier in person, right? And so they started implementing small shifts throughout the day to really just be a little bit friendlier. And it doesn't have to be this grand thing, but these small moments over time really compact and compile. So to get into a little bit about the subconscious mind and how this affects habits, I want to give you guys an analogy here or a comparison. And I was chatting with one of my friends the other day, and I think with the colder weather coming, she just hasn't been as disciplined as normal. She's been waking up later. She's kind of just rolling out of bed, going over to her computer and opening her first Zoom call for the day for her meetings, right? And she was talking to me and she's saying, Michelle, I just feel like I don't have the willpower to wake up early, to work out, to eat my breakfast, right? To kind of get more prepared for the day ahead, to feel accomplished before she starts work. And this is something I hear a lot, right? We think we have to have this immense willpower to change some habit or some part of ourself. And willpower actually will not get you very far in habit formation. And the reason why is that willpower is located in the conscious mind, which is only 5% of your total mind. Most of your habits are deep within your subconscious mind, below the surface, right? So to give you guys an example here with the jaguar and the mouse, if you're only depending on willpower to go up against the giant jaguar of your conscious mind or of your subconscious mind, it's not likely going to work very well, or it might work for a couple days, but that subconscious mind will eventually overpower. So we really want to start getting the subconscious mind involved. And the subconscious mind is where all your habits live, whether that be action oriented, feeling oriented, or thinking oriented. It's also where your long-term memory lies. Your conscious mind is more, short-term memory and analytical thinking, as well as that willpower. So to give you guys something that you probably experienced in your own life involving the subconscious mind is that a lot is stored within our subconscious that without a trigger, it's not going to be brought forth. So the other day, my dad sent me a picture of me with my dog when I was, I think, 12 years old, right? And when I saw that picture, it took me right back to that moment where we were in Maine. I was with my dog. I'm super happy, right? We're on the side of the road, just living life. And it brought back that memory. I could remember that from when I was 12 years old. But without that picture, it wouldn't have been brought forth or brought, to the surface from my subconscious mind. So very important to become aware that a lot is happening within the surface. The subconscious mind is also controlling your breathing, your heart beating, everything that's happening within your body is occurring within the subconscious mind. Likely, unless you just learned how to drive, your ability to drive and that knowledge is also in the subconscious mind. So your conscious mind, where most people place focus when they're developing new habits or new routines or anything like that, is just the tip of the iceberg, right? It's just the very top. And the subconscious is this massive chunk of ice below the surface that is ruling a lot more than we often realize in our day-to-day lives. So this is why, even if we know what we should be doing, if it doesn't align with what's ingrained in the subconscious, it's likely not going to stick in terms of habit formation. And so we can't depend on willpower alone to build positive habits. Of course, willpower is important, right? You got to have motivation to actually implement a plan. But we also want to get the subconscious involved and really start carving out those pathways within our mind to get as deeply ingrained and really rooted so that our brain can go down them in an easy and efficient way. All right. So as we go throughout this, when determining what habits you'd like to change in general in any area of your life, we always, of course, want to focus on what we can control, right? Because a lot of life is outside of our control, other people, what they think of us, what they don't, what's happening in the world. We always want to focus on what we can control. And this is actually a really big, what is called the primal need in human beings. We crave control and we crave certainty. And that's why when things are uncertain or unsure, things can be really rattling for a lot of people, right? Because we crave this control and this certainty. And the reason why is because our brains were wired from primal days to really keep us safe and to keep us alive, right? We chatted about this briefly last week. But your brain was wired to protect you and wired to keep you in the comfort of what you know, right? And so we crave this control and certainty. And when we don't have it, we don't feel the best. These are other primal needs. But really, that certainty was necessary in our primal days to make sure that we kept ourselves safe and alive. And that was our top concern. All right. So the two things you can always control in habit formation and in really any part of life is, of course, yourself and your response. And yourself comes into play when we're doing a physical action habit, but your response comes into play when we go into the thinking and feeling habits, right? Because often things get triggered by outside circumstances or people that we might not have control over, but we can have control over our response to it. So, number one, focus on what you can control. Number two, stay consistent daily, right? We've all heard that it's better to go to the gym every other day and do, 20 minutes of a workout versus go one time a week and do 2 hours, right? Better to be consistent with these efforts. And then finally, we want to focus on really tiny shifts and implementing new habits. Going back to chatting with my friend the other day, she was waking up at 9 a.m. She wanted to start waking up at 6:30 in the morning, working out, doing all these activities before work. And I recommended, why don't you start by waking up 15 minutes earlier, right? It's more attainable. You're not going to feel as overwhelmed to implement it. And so in every area with habit change and creating these more positive habits, make sure you start really, really small. All right, so getting into the habit onion. Now, most people, when they think of really creating habits, often there's some end goal in mind, right? The goal of maybe you want to lose a certain amount of weight or earn a certain amount of money or whatever it may be, right? And these good habits, whether it be exercising or eating healthier or going to bed earlier, whatever it may be, they all make rational sense, right? We all know what we should be doing to live a happy and fulfilling life and a healthy life, right? But if they conflict with your identity, who you are at your core, you're not going to put them into action because you don't believe that's who you are as a person. And the outer layer of this onion, the habit onion, is really the goal itself, right? And normally most people place focus on the goal, whether it be whatever it could be for you, right? Earning a certain amount of money or losing weight or whatever it is, right? Most people place emphasis on the goal, but it's more important to go deeper to the core of the onion. The second layer here, or an example of a positive habit goal, is to wake up at 6 a.m. every single day, right? That's a goal that you could attain or aspire to if you're trying to wake up earlier. Below this are the systems. And this is a great quote by James Clear. He wrote Atomic Habits, which is a great book. And he says that you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And what systems are really the things you're doing consistently daily to ensure that goal happens, right? And really, once you start implementing systems, you're inevitably going to reach your goal because these are small things you're doing each and every day. So the concept of systems, if I want to wake up at 6 a.m., would be my routine the previous night, right? Why am I waking up early? Why is it incentivizing to me? Tracking progress, all these things we can do that are inevitably going to get us to that goal. All right. And so what we're going to do is for our first breakout rooms, we're going to break off. And I want you guys to share one goal that you'd like to start implementing or aspiring towards, or maybe you're even working on this now, and a system you can start doing daily for that habit, right? So a system can be anything. It can be making sure that on Sunday night you go to the supermarket and you food prep for the week if you want to eat healthier, right? These small things that you can do. So I'm going to break you guys off. Again, you don't have to turn on your cameras. It is great if you can, but I understand if you cannot. But just make sure that you accept the breakout room, head into it. We'll spend a couple minutes here, and then I'll bring you guys back into the main presentation. Everyone joins back in over the next minute or so. Feel free to share in the chat what you said in your groups. So what's that habit formation or that habit you want to start implementing, and what's the small system you can start doing each day to implement that? And everyone will join back in about 10 seconds, and we will keep going here. All right, and since everyone is back in, if you could go ahead and share, or feel free to if you'd like, share the habit and the system that you are going to start implementing in your day-to-day life. And we'll keep going here. Let me go ahead and share again. All right. All right. All right. So getting into the final part, really the core of the onion is your identity, right? And this is at the very core of the onion. It's a very big part in habit formation and something that is rarely talked about, right? Because we like to focus on, okay, what is this I want to achieve? Okay, how can I start doing this day to day? But your identity is very important. Identity is something like, I am a morning person. I operate best early in the morning. This is something you believe about yourself, because we always follow through on who we believe we are, right? Teachers will always teach. Someone who believes they put their family first will always be there for their family members. And we need to really start creating this core of an identity shift if you're going to start implementing habits. And the way that you create this, of course, it happens over time, but you create an aligned identity at the core of that habit onion by staying consistent with those systems that you implement. Over time, it just becomes who you are. This is what you do, right? It doesn't happen overnight, but the more and more you do it, that is going to become a part of who you are as a human being. Another way that this is really helpful to start changing this identity shift is to get around other people that have similar identities or similar ways that they want to be, right? So this gets into the accountability portion and forming community around these positive habits, or just a way that you want to start thinking or feeling or acting. And again, everything makes sense, right? We all know what we should be doing, but if they conflict with that identity, if you don't believe you're a morning person, if you don't believe you're not that good at exercising, or you don't have that much stamina, or whatever it may be, you're never going to actually take action on it. So let's get tactical a little bit here. I want to introduce you guys to the habit loop. This is a part of a book from it's called The Power of Habit. And it's a very simple concept that we're going to go over briefly in terms of habit formation. So these three areas consist of cue, routine, and reward. A cue or a trigger is often some type of feeling that you're experiencing in your day to day, right? It could be feeling, we'll use for this example, feeling worried, but it could really be any emotion that triggers some type of routine. And remember, this could be a routine that is an action habit based, or it could be a way of thinking or feeling. So for me personally, if I start to feel worried, sometimes I will eat a bunch of cookies, right? I love those tiny cookies from Trader Joe's. Those are my go-to in that tub. And so I start to feel worried. I eat the cookies and I feel comforted, right? So you can plug in any habit that you don't necessarily think maybe is the best for you here. But there's generally some type of emotion. It could be feeling stressed or anxious or whatever it is that triggers a routine, whether that be good or bad. And then you get that reward feeling, right? And so your brain registers this as, okay, this happened, I did this, I have this reward, and it starts to create this habit loop. So what we're going to do in terms of shifting our habits is really focus more on this routine than anything. So it could be anything, right? It could be eating a bunch of cookies every night, not exercising when you said you would, getting frustrated at your spouse for something really small, snoozing your alarm every morning, beating yourself up when you're not productive. That's a really big one I've been discussing at companies recently, is beating yourself up, because we're always the hardest on ourselves, right? But really what we want to do is become aware of the habit we want to replace, right? Pretty straightforward. Become aware of what it is. So we start with the routine. And this is pretty easy to determine normally. We normally know when something is probably not the best for us to be doing. Then we want to go to the cue, right? This is really the trigger that spawns this behavior, this action, this habit. What feeling is driving this habit, right? Is it boredom? Is it hunger? In the case of the cookies, is it distraction, stress, worry? What is the cue or the trigger that's triggering that less than ideal habit that we want to maybe change or improve or get rid of? So often it takes a little bit of time to reflect on this, because sometimes we think it's one thing when there might be something underneath the surface. So take time to just, as you're in the, after this workshop, or whenever you take time to actually start establishing this for yourself, take some time, write these things down in a pad of paper and a pen, and establish what that cue or trigger is for the habit. And then finally, of course, what's the reward? Now, this may seem obvious, right? But it's often a feeling or emotion that you're seeking rather than the more surface level thing, right? So in the case of the cookie example, I feel worried, I eat a bunch of cookies, I feel comforted, right? It might be the surface level reward is enjoying that cookie or enjoying the taste of it. But there's that deeper craving of feeling comfort in this scenario, right? But it could be a lot of different things. It could be socializing, increased energy, feeling loved, accomplishment, excitement. It could be any of these positive emotions. And so it's good to take some time and, again, just reflect on that too. What's the reward you're craving more of in your day-to-day life? And then finally, all we're going to do is we're going to keep the cue or that trigger and reward the same. We only really need to focus on changing the routine and implementing those systems that we just discussed when you guys were in the breakout rooms, right? So the routine, we obviously want to change it into something more positive than eating a bunch of cookies every single time I start to feel worried. So in this case, the old habit was feeling worried. The cookies were eaten. I felt comforted. In this case, we're just going to replace that routine with a positive action. Now, this could be also if you're shifting your way of thinking or feeling, you're going to start to shift that as well. So feeling worried leads to calling up a positive friend, right? I could call someone that I know that is really uplifting, or text them or email them, whatever it may be, and really get a strong reward of feeling comforted as well. So it's just replacing that routine, all right? And as we're doing this, remember to focus on what you can control, stay consistent daily, and small shifts. So this really plays in, I have written here under 20 seconds. It's been shown that if you switch out a routine that takes under 20 seconds, it's really easy to do, the more likely you're going to stick to it, right? So instead of reaching for the cookies, I reached for my phone and I called my friend. It takes roughly the same amount of time, if not even less than 20 seconds. All right. So this is a really great way as you are implementing systems to really start with simplicity versus adding on, all these different things that you want to do. So a really great structure when you're establishing systems for any type of habit formation is to start with I will behavior at time in location, right? And so this could be as simple as something like I will go for a walk at 7 a.m. outside my house, right? Whatever it might be, if you want to start exercising more or getting more time outside. Another concept that's been shown to work really well is to stack habits with something that's already really ingrained into your life. So this could be something as simple as brushing your teeth, right? Most of us probably brush our teeth in the morning. So stacking up, doing 10 push-ups after you brush your teeth in your bedroom, right? Following that format, or replying to emails only after you write in your gratitude journal in the kitchen, right? So stacking it with something we normally do, whether it be emails or text messages or looking at the news, with something more positive we want to start implementing. It's easier for our brain to really encode it with this habit stacking. So for our second group exercise, we're going to break off and take that goal or that system that you want to start implementing and see how you can stack that with something that you're already doing in your life that's already really ingrained. And I'll send out the prompt again, but really we want to just focus on what's a habit that you can stack on something you already do, whether it be in the morning, throughout the day, anytime at all. Let me go ahead and break you guys. Feel free to, again, share that habit you're going to start stacking and what you're going to start stacking it on top of. So I know for me personally, I try to meditate every single morning, if just for 5 or 10 minutes. And so I will initially, as soon as I wake out of bed, I normally do a guided meditation. And so I will plug in my headphones on my phone and do that immediately upon waking up. Generally, if I'm doing meditation at night as well, I'll do it right before I go to sleep. So there's that trigger of, obviously, hopefully I'm going to wake up in the morning and go to sleep at night, right? So I have that trigger, I can stack it easily or more easily. So as everyone joins back in, feel free to share that habit you're going to start stacking and what you're going to stack it on top of. So I mentioned just before is that generally I meditate in the morning. And so I stack it on top of the most basic habit of just waking up in the morning, or the most basic action of just waking up, right? And so immediately upon waking up, I will plug in my headphones, do a guided meditation, and it ensures that I start the day off right. So if you can share that in the chat, that'd be great. And we will keep going here. So let me share my screen. All right. Okay. So now we're going to get into the top positive habits across the USA. All right. And these are the ones that we found, we're always interviewing Americans all across the country. So now we're doing it virtually via Zoom, but we've been interviewing people for quite some time. And these are the common themes, the common positive habits that we've seen. And so as we go throughout these, things are going to resonate differently with different people, depending on your priorities, your background, whatever it is you do day to day, right? But as long as you can implement, a small part of these, it's really, really powerful to start implementing. So the first one is a morning routine. And we chatted about this briefly last week, but most of us, when we wake up in the morning, we instantly look at our phones, right? And as we know from last week, this causes our minds often to go into a state of worrying about the day ahead or the stress, and we don't start the day off in a positive or proactive way. And so the Americans we've chatted with that are really taking happiness into their own terms, they always start their mornings in a positive way. And it doesn't have to be some grand morning routine that's an hour long. Really just taking a couple minutes in the morning to start your day off right. And you can do this in a couple different ways, but you can start it off by doing a gratitude journal, right? Writing down a couple things that you're grateful for, like we chatted about last week. It only takes 2 minutes to do so. And it's really powerful to start your day off thinking about the good in your life and what you can appreciate. The second piece of this is doing meditation in the morning. So I was saying I do this as well. And normally, or not normally, but sometimes when you mention meditation, people think that they can't do it or they've tried it before and the thoughts are constantly running, and so they don't think they're doing it correctly. But you can always meditate, and it really doesn't mean clearing your mind entirely. It just means bringing awareness to either your breath or to a guided meditation. Some people even use walking or exercising as a form of meditation. It's really just bringing awareness to either your breath or listening or your thought process. It's just bringing more awareness at the start of the day. So meditation can be really, really great to do. I have a lot of great meditations I'm happy to recommend, send your way as well if you need any suggestions. But it's really powerful to just start your day off in a positive way. I love doing guided meditations because someone's walking you through, and there's normally some nice music behind it, and it's normally easier to do than just sitting in silence. Although that can be good as well if that works for you. I do that sometimes, but normally I'm a guided meditation person. And finally, starting off the day can be really great to do by listening to some positive content or watching some form of positive content or reading some form of positive content or something motivational or inspiring to you, or maybe just interesting to you. And so I recommend, normally what I'll do is as I'm going for a walk in the morning, I'll listen to positive content on my headphones. So it'll either be a podcast or it'll be some other way of bringing awareness to, again, that positive mindset that I can start incorporating and to start the day off right with. But a lot of people like to do this by reading just a couple pages from your favorite book or something that's really interesting to you. Because again, it's starting your day on your own terms, which when we start our day looking at our cell phones or social media or the news, often we're giving that power away right away. And so you feel almost a little bit out of control first thing in the morning versus taking back that control. The second positive habit is to really make sure you're tracking your progress each and every day. So there's a couple ways you can do this. But I recommend just, going kind of old school with it and getting either a calendar, or if you don't have a calendar, just taking a blank piece of paper and, drawing a couple lines one way, a couple lines the other way, making a chart and just Xing off every single day that you do this positive habit. Because a couple things happen here when you start tracking. First of all, we very easily forget all of the good progress we've made if we're not tracking it. And that's because there's so much going through our brains each and every day, right? We have up to 60,000 thoughts per day, that unless we're tracking the progress we made, it can sometimes seem like nothing is happening or nothing has improved. So it's important to track your progress through a calendar. You can also write it down in your phone or in a journal as well. And the really cool thing about tracking progress is that it can be for any habit or any area of your life that you want to do, right? And so it could be if you're trying to be friendlier, right? Crafting or tracking how you were friendly that day. You can X it off, but it's even more powerful if you write down the specific instance that you did that day, right? Whether it be a physical action habit or a way of thinking and feeling, right? Now, the cool thing about tracking is that if you are writing down every single thing you're doing that day or just one thing a day that you're improving on or forming a habit around, you can look back after a week or a month or a year and see all this beautiful progress you've made in a notebook. So it's really, really powerful. And it's really motivating when I feel like this happens to me. I've heard many people talk about it, where you kind of reach a point or a day where you're not feeling the best. You feel like things aren't going right. And it's really nice to be able to look back and see all the progress you've made in your life, both personally and also professionally as well. And the third habit is to move your body, ideally in the morning, but just throughout the day as well. All right. So this can be, it doesn't have to be anything intense, just going for a walk or maybe doing some stretching or yoga, but really getting your body moving in different ways than just sitting at your desk chair all day or on your couch or whatever it is you're doing. And so I recommend doing exercises that get your body in different ways than normally we are if we're just walking or sitting. And so in order to do this, really just doing either some jumping jacks to get the blood flowing with your arms over your head. Very rarely are our arms over our head, right? But that helps our blood flow a lot. As well as this yoga pose that's called legs up the wall. very basic, very obvious, right? Her legs are just up the wall. But that again, it gets the blood flowing, and it's really, really good to do either first thing in the morning or before you go to sleep at night as well. Now, as with all of these habits that we've mentioned before, it's really important to create some accountability around it, because without community, without accountability, very often you'll fall off of them, right? Myself included. So you've probably started or tried to implement some type of habit, and maybe it lasted for a couple days or a week, maybe even a month. But what happened after that, right? Very often we can fall off unless someone else is holding us accountable to it. So accountability is really key. If you can get a friend or a family member or a coworker, doesn't have to be necessarily implementing the same habit as you, just some type of habit can be really powerful in encouraging and motivating each other, and just checking in, once a week to make sure that you're sticking to it. And the big piece of this I also like to mention is that make sure you're choosing someone to hold you accountable that will actually hold you accountable. Because I know for me, I love my mom, she's amazing, but she won't actually hold me accountable, right? I need to get someone who's gonna, call me out and make sure I'm sticking to it. So as you're looking for that person or that group, just keep that in mind as well. So today we talked about the simple neuroscience of habit formation, that most of our habits of feeling, acting, and thinking are really deep in that subconscious, and we have to bring it to the surface. The step-by-step plan to build positive habits, right? Making sure that we are becoming aware of that routine or that habit we're trying to replace, as well as the trigger emotionally that is causing it, and the reward that we're craving as well as we start to shift. And then the top 3 habits, right? So making sure you're starting off your morning in a positive way, tracking your progress each and every day, very, very powerful to do, as well as moving your body as well. And if you need some help in finding that accountability partner or that group, we have heard this a lot, that people need this accountability program. And so we're going to be launching something soon with American Happiness where we connect you with a group of people, and you're able to hold each other accountable, but also just be around more positive, uplifting people. So if you're interested in that, feel free to join our email list. Should be launching in the next couple of weeks, but